The Dancing with Wisdom podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast. My name is Sunil, and we invite you to join us on this quest to make sense of life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we have been certainly on that quest. I still feel like we're scratching the surface, but we've covered so much already. But there's something that I want to bring up now, which is about removing our idols, you see. So, and the reason why is because you do actually address this in your text, but it's something which I've always been thinking about as well. And that is, what role do these superstars or the powers, so-called powers that be, what role do they have to play on us? And are they being wise before they even give us the information? And are we wise actually listening?
Yes.
I mean, that's a big topic. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just in a sense, for our listeners and viewers, just to get the context of where we are, we're looking at the whole area of wisdom, and we're trying to understand why we should discover wisdom. We've talked about desiring wisdom, wisdom for the heart, wisdom for the mind, wisdom for life. And now we're talking about developing wisdom. And in the last podcast, we talked about ego and getting the right healthy balance of ego, understanding that as a healthy attention to oneself, not thinking too highly of oneself and not thinking too little of oneself. And another word for that is humility. So not thinking of yourself less, but thinking less of yourself. That's the key thing there. And one of the things that gets in the way in terms of understanding how we manage our ego is the importance of idols and removing idols. And you just made a reference earlier. You know, when we think of idols, particularly here in the West, we think of American Idol, or we think of, you know, these great famous pop stars and these larger than life images that people, you know, go crazy over. They spend, you know, their time and energy collecting their pictures, or stalking them, or finding out about them, you know, these celebrities.
But that's because that's what people say. You know, they say, who's your idol? My idol is, and this generally goes to a film star, pop star, someone who's got the perfect body.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
You know, it's quite shallow.
And it's all about image. It's, you know, because even there's this larger than life glamorous person, maybe very beautiful, very handsome, maybe got lots of money, is very, very successful, and we pour a huge amount of emotional energy and attention and focus. And, you know, in many ways, there's nothing new. That's the way that we're wired. Going back thousands of years, people talk about statues that people bow down, looking to them for extra power. People look to, even today, people worship different statues and idols that they give reverence to. But I think the root of idolatry is this issue about wanting overemphasis, over devotion to something. And one of the things I try to bring out in the book is that idolatry is not just celebrities, it's not just statues that people bow down to, but actually, and this is a famous theologian said, is that the human heart is an idol factory. We have something within us that wants to adore and worship and put on a pedestal something or somebody. And we see that in modern life with, you know, celebrities. There's an idol worship of them. It's as if there's something within our heart that has to give ultimate worth. But it might not just be celebrity. All of us are doing that with something.
See, I would question that ever so slightly, because I think that, I mean, we can't actually answer if that's true, because the thing is, in the way we get brought up is that we are surrounded by that. It's like, you know, we get brought up and we see things on television. You know, you go back and you've got a famous musician, or you know, go back even further and you got to say, they say, oh, I am, you know, in charge of this area, you must bow down to me, you know, and so forth. People are forced to kind of worship this kind of, but what is it that we need? Like, beyond that, take all of that away. What do we actually want? Do we want to do that naturally? Or is it a case that we just...
So worship, when I use the word worship, I mean give ultimate worth and value to. So everybody is looking at something and saying, if I have that, then I know I'm okay. And it could be good things, family, material success,
Oh, okay.
Career advancement. And we look at something to say, if things were taken away from me, then it'd be okay because I still have ... whatever that fills that gap. So if you like, we're creating something that is our bottom line, the thing that you could take everything away from me, but you can't take that away from me. Now, one of the big challenges about that is that life is so fragile. Life is transient. Again, I talked in previous podcasts, I talked about my friend Abhishek Banerjee, who died in 2014 at the age of 32. And one of the things that really hit hard with me was just how transient life is and how it can go. And so what am I investing in? What am I putting my hope and confidence in? And so people, put their hope and confidence in, if I made $1 million, made £1 million, if I married the woman of my dreams, if I had children, they don't necessarily be bad things. But what happens is we put too much emphasis on it. We expect more than it can give. And I think it's particularly relevant as we try to live in wisdom and dance with wisdom in our lives, is the fact that we live in one of the most advanced, in the most advanced stage of, it always is the most advanced stage in human history. But in the sense we have so much, and yet we were promised, that with the rise of technology, we'd be working less. We were promised with the advance of technology that we would somehow be happier and be more fulfilled. And yet there's a deep sense, I would say, in our culture and society of disappointment, that we have all the information, we have all the education, we have all these resources available to us, and yet we're still not happy. And I'd say that's because we've created idols in our lives as things that we've made too important, that ultimately cannot fulfill, cannot satisfy.
But also with idols as well, though, whatever that idol may be, you are relying on the fact that what they're giving you is correct and the right thing to follow.
Yes, absolutely.
And who's to say that it is? I mean, you watch some of these, programs like, I love such and such on Love Island, or I love such and such in Made in Chelsea. Was like, well, great, but please don't act like it. I mean,
right.
So for me, it's like, who are you?
Yes.
Who are you? What are you? I'll tell you what, if you're being your true self, that's probably a pretty good idol to kind of follow. If you're dancing with wisdom, even if you're just beginning your journey
Yes.
to dance with wisdom, then that's a pretty good idol to follow yourself.
So what do you mean? A good.
So what I'm saying is that if you've got, if you're looking externally for someone to worship,
yes,
for someone to say, you are my idol, I'm going to be like you.
And you won't say that consciously, but you'll always be looking for something as your ultimate, basically.
Yeah, so what if you can look within yourself and find the wisdom within yourself to go on a better path to dance with wisdom?
Yes.
Then surely that is better to follow than to try and follow an idol.
Yeah, I mean, I would take it a step further, because I think you've got to have a right view of yourself. We talked about that in managing one's ego. But I'm still, part of managing my ego is understanding how conflicted I am. And so there's this search for perfection, this search for the ultimate person that will satisfy and bring what I long for. And I mean, C.S. Lewis, again, as he often does, says some amazing things. And he says, and this is on page 112, he vividly describes how in the physical world we can see instances where the longing for our desire is fulfilled. So he talks about a duckling wants to swim, so there's such a thing as water. He talks about erotic sexual arousal, and there is such a thing as sex, which in our day and culture seeks fulfillment in a whole variety of ways. But then he says something which is fascinating. He says, if I find in myself a desire for something that nothing in this world can fulfill, then it must be that I was made for another world. And his point being that we long for things, and yet, it's hard to explain, but we've all experienced, you've always wanted to have something, and you get it, and it may be a good thing. getting married, having children, getting the job that you've always wanted. And it's great, but it's not quite enough to fully satisfy. And what happens is that people say, oh, if I got that, then I'd be happy. But as we've advanced, particularly in the Western world, particularly as for those of us who are wealthy, and anybody watching this on YouTube or listening to this on a podcast, you're part of the wealthy world. No matter what you think of, compare yourself to others. That we are staggeringly wealthy, all of us who are able to access this. We have so much, and yet we're still not satisfied. And I think Lewis would say is that you're putting all your longing and emotion onto something that ultimately is not going to satisfy, because those desires cannot be fulfilled in this world. But we keep on putting that. And then we have some celebrity, for example, who we put all our emotional investment in, and then they let us down, they disappoint us. All that thing we think, I get that job, I get that money, I get that relationship. And it's never quite enough.
But I think there is a way. I think that in life, there is a way of having enough in split seconds.
Yes.
But it's maintaining it, you see.
Yes.
And so what you're basically getting to here, so I'm a bit squeaky over here on these seats, but what you get to is effectively the ultimate connection to God.
Yes.
Okay, which I completely agree. And it actually links in with what I was going to say. So there are these moments, like let's say with my children, for example. Now for anyone who may not have children, and they might go, oh yeah, about children, and talk about children. But the bottom line is that there is a moment of pure love.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
When I think about holding my children and even seeing my wife, I mean, I remember after my daughter was born, I remember looking at my wife thinking, wow, men are the weaker sex. There's no, and I genuinely mean that.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The men are the weak sex, just hands down.
Yeah, and emotionally, often they are stronger than us men,
yeah. Well, I think they are stronger in many, many, many ways, But I think that, and then I think of my son as well. And I was smiling now, just thinking about it. And there was that moment where I just felt ultimate love and contentment. And there was something heavenly about it. And if I could have stayed in that moment, obviously they grow up.
Yes, that's right.
If I could stay in that moment, I would be content.
Yes.
And it was nothing to do with money. It was nothing to do with house, nothing to do with car. It was nothing to do with any of that.
Yes.
It was heavenly.
The joy of having a newborn child,
which I feel like is tied in to what you're ultimately saying about the connection to God.
Yes.
You see, it was heavenly.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that what's fascinating about that is that that's what makes wisdom so wonderful and mysterious as well, is the fact that it connects us, the big word for it is existential, the whole bigger picture about why I'm here, what is the purpose of our existence. Because with a birth, we're brought face to face with a profound mystery, a mystery of goodness, and just it's awe-inspiring. Yeah.
Do you feel, now we're talking about idols, we're talking about removing our idols.
Yes.
And I think, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's going to happen.
Right.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think that people are too wrapped up in the television. I think they're too wrapped up in, quick, come on here and be a star for a little while. You may have to take off your top and pull down your pants, but you're going to get on there. And people are just tied to that. People do feel that.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating you say that. Yeah.
But I do, however,
yes,
with that in mind. So it then leads to my next question. Yeah. Let's just say, for example, it can't happen for everybody. Let's just say, I think it can, but let's just say people aren't perhaps strong enough, whatever, to do that. Let's look at it from another angle.
Yes.
Do the celebrity of the world, and I want to put like world leaders in there as well. Yeah. Okay. Do they have an obligation to study wisdom really intently? So the content that they're passing down. You take Judi Dench. I really admire Judi Dench.
Oh, the actress.
I think she's phenomenal. I look at her and I like, great. And I'm sure she would be here and say, "Oh, I've made lots of mistakes," and something like that.
Sure.
But I look at her and I think, do you know what?
Oh, the way she's conducted her life.
Oh, what
from what we can see,
what a talent! What a talent!
From what we can see, yeah.
Yeah, from what we can see. But yeah, good point. But for me, I think I feel like a healthy celebrity out there, because she's not going, I'm a celebrity, look at me, look at me, look at me. She's there. She's a celebrity because of her status. She's following what she does. So do idols.
So she's taking her leadership. She's taking the prominent role. She's acting with responsibility because she's aware.
Responsibility.
She's aware of the fact that people are watching her, the fact that people are looking to her as a role model, and so she's careful. As far as we can tell, she's careful about the way she speaks, the way she behaves, because she knows that people are looking to her for cues. And I think that that's certainly wisdom.
I think she's also been true to herself.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I think she's been true to herself. I think she's sort of a beautiful human being.
Yes.
And I think that, and there are lots of people out there like that, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that.
But so often what we see in the world is people who don't take that responsibility, people who are quick to be critical, condemning,
Well,
and nasty in their comments and the way that they live, as if without any sort of fear of the consequences or any sense of responsibility that they owe to the younger generation or to others or even to themselves, basically. I mean, and that is, that is a world that's living without wisdom. I mean, I do want to pick you up on something else you said a little bit earlier on, but it's just really important, I think. And just to this issue of idolatry is I said, the human heart is an idol factory. And if we take that thought, that concept, we have intense longing and desires in our hearts. And they are so powerful that they direct us much more than we realize. We're ultimately emotional beings, driven by our emotions much more than we give credit for. We like to say that we're logical. We like to say that we think rationally. But actually, emotions drive us much more powerfully. And, it's a quick example of that, so you meet somebody and you decide, actually, I don't like that person. And then you find reasons for not to like them. And we do that in a split second. And the point I'm trying to make here is that those intense longings, nothing in this world can fulfill. And one of the big ways, is that happens is through the whole area of sexual desire. Malcolm Muggeridge had a quote, which is always read. He said, when a man goes to a prostitute, he's actually on a search for God. And that sounds
it's quite a strong
thing to say.
Yeah.
And I think one of the points about being made there is this issue, is that sexual desire, in a sense, is one of the big idols of our day and culture. And we're seeing that, in the way it's portrayed through the media, as well as the experimentation more and more in terms of different forms of sexuality, different issues around transgender, a huge amount of areas, okay? It's very controversial, very topical. People talking about their identities based on their sexuality. But actually, I think, what would Lewis say? What would Martin Luther say, who said the human heart is an idol factory? Saying is that we're making sex into an idol that it can never deliver. We're putting that at the center rather than seeing it in the context of everything else. I mean, ultimately, sex is a good thing. I mean, none of us would be here if it wasn't for sex. God created it.
Well, no, I got brought in by the stork. I've seen Dumbo.
But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that sex is like fire. So when it's in the fireplace, then it brings warmth, it brings comfort, it brings nurturing, and that's a wonderful thing. But you take the fire out of the fireplace, you can burn down a whole house. You can destroy a whole life. And this is one of the things, because those are intense longings and desires. And what we've done with sex as an idol is we've made it, with our promiscuous culture. We said, with anybody, anytime, anywhere, with who I want, so long as it's between consenting adults. That's what we've said. But that, in a sense, look at the consequences of what that's created in our world in terms of broken families, children growing up without father figures or mother figures. The effect is, and we're almost blind to recognizing that. And we do that with sex. We've done the same thing with money. In a sense, if you think about, the 2008 financial crisis, what was that? That was about financial promiscuity. That was about just saying, we'll lend money to anybody, anytime, anywhere. We'll rise up all this debt, emotionally driven by greed. So these are big things, and the only way to remove those idols is by showing that there's actually something more beautiful and more longing. I just want to quote Lewis. Lewis has got great things. And this is what he says. He says, this is on page 113. It says, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased.
Yeah. Well, do you know, it's interesting, because one thing else that I wanted to just bring up before we wrap it up today as well is that people, it's so easy to be an idol now.
Yeah.
So let's just say, right, we are on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
So some people are going to be watching this on YouTube.
Yeah.
And there are people who can create their channels,
Yeah.
and they can go out and they can just pick something to moan about, and they will just shout about it and shout about it and shout about it. And people will latch onto that, and they go, yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm going to get angry with you.
Yes.
I'm going to get angry with you. Well, that's not wisdom.
No.
That's not dancing in wisdom.
I mean, what kind of energy is it producing? It's producing a very negative energy. Very negative energy. Yeah.
I mean, have your say.
Yeah.
But there's a way to
and
say.
Speak out against injustice and things that are wrong.
Absolutely.
But you've got to find a way to do that brings life. And it's very easy to be critical. I mean, I've been there. I'm critical, condemning, criticizing. It's much easier to criticize, condemn, and complain. Much easier, because then you see it's always the other person's problem. It's always their problem. It's always their fault. I don't have to do anything.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to actually finish today's podcast on a question that's on page 115. Right. And it's under your review questions to consider. And before you do a quick wrap up of today, I want to read this. Okay, it's question number 1. And I'd love all the listeners to just take a moment to think about this question and apply it to their lives. And it's, how aware are you of the idols you have created in your own heart and are looking to for meaning and satisfaction?
Wow.
And Mike, I'm going to add on if I may, just tell me about. And I have to ask yourself this one question: is it healthy? Yeah. I mean, is it healthy? What you're doing there, and should you be applying things that Sunil's been talking about in the earlier podcast? And would you find more peace and effectively more wisdom doing that instead? So talk us through today's podcast. I'm sure we will be coming back to this.
Yes. So we're talking about the whole issue of idolatry and about how the human heart is an idol factory. And what we mean by that is this over desire. There's a New Testament word called epithemia, Greek word, which means longing and wanting something, but wanting something too much. And we're always doing that to something. And we've talked about the big examples of money, sex, and power is another one. But we do that even with good things. We expect too much. We put too much load onto things in this world that ultimately cannot deliver. And it's, removing our idols is realizing that ultimately there's nothing in this life that will ultimately satisfy. And that's why I think one of the big tragedies of our modern world that is in Western secular thinking that leads to cynicism is that we say that this life is all there is, that you die and then that's it, finito, finish, nothing. What does that mean? That means I've got all my investments are here. Books like 100 Things to Do Before I Die. No, you were made for another world. You were made for something much greater and much more wonderful and glorious than this. And that's what this quest for wisdom is about, is finding that about. And so thank you for joining us on this. But keep listening, because we're going to talk more about what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so, in depth. And remember, if you do have questions, do let us know. You can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can write a comment below, and we will read through that, and if you're happy to, leave your name as well, or give a fake name, and we will do our best to discuss that in the podcast. And of course, if you're listening to a podcast, we really appreciate a 5-star review, so you can, so other people can benefit and enjoy the podcast. So do share it with your friends. If you'd like to get a hold of us directly, Sunil?
So if you go to drsunil.com, you can contact us through the website.
There we go. And you can get hold of me directly. That's Elliot, ELLIOTT, at monkeynutuk.com. I always say that, Sunil, because in all my life, do you know what? All my life, it's always been 2 L's, 1 T. Yeah? Or the other way around. It's always been that. It's never been 2 L's, 2 T's. It's crazy. Yeah. And of course, you can get us on the Monkey Nut Audiobooks Facebook and Instagram page. So thanks very much. Great content. I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks. Thank you, Elliot.
You've been listening to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, presented by Sunil Rahija and Elliot Frisbee. For details on the Dancing with Wisdom book and its accompanying workbook, please visit drsunil.com. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, then please share it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and help it to grow by giving it a nice review. Life's challenges can diminish, define, or develop you. Which one will it be? Make sure you hunger for the wise one. The choice is yours.